Hey there, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm recording this on the second Saturday of spring break. So I am starting to get the thoughts in my mind about going back to work. I know you all understand what I'm talking about because it's real. As educators, we start to think about, do I have everything ready? Do I need to work on anything this final weekend? Oh my gosh, am I going to wake up on time? All of the things. And to add on to that, now I have to think about the dog, the new puppy, as I go back to work. I got to spend some time with my daughter and my new grandbaby yesterday, and I was gone for about 4 hours. And he went into the kennel, the little crate. He's 4.5-ish, so I know he's not like puppy puppy, but until I really know he's acclimated to the house, I don't want him just roaming freely and freaking out and all of the things. And they told me he is crate trained from the shelter. So I put him in, and I've had put him in for a few shorter sprints of time during the week, but this was his longest time. And I come home to just a disaster. It was just wild and crazy in the kennel. So I know that Monday is also going to be a day where I'm going to be a little anxious for his well-being while I'm gone, but we'll get it figured out. Having said all that, as we do get ready to go back to work, or you might be getting ready to go on your spring break this week, I have really been thinking about systems this year in schools and how, as a school leader, a principal, those were critical to the success of our schools. And as you've heard me say before, going into schools that were failing and having to rebuild systems and then consistently implement the systems, that was the key to our success. And when I could see and feel that my staff was no longer just reacting to everything, they started to feel successful. And that's how we were able to grow at each of the schools that I led. As I was a classroom teacher, I also had systems in place. And during the time when I was actually in the classroom, my first 4.5 years of my career, my daughter was young. So I know people say to me now, well, Dixon, your daughter's 35. She has her own child. She lives alone. You don't have anything really to come home to besides a dog. Then what you do and how you implement things might be completely different than how we can when we have children at home. And I get it. But the thing is I've been there. And my situation, and some of you may be able to relate, I was married at the time, but my ex-husband didn't do much when it came to running the household and taking care of our daughter's things and getting her where she needed to go. I had to organize all of that if it was going to happen. And so today I want to spend just a little bit of time with you talking about some systems that I utilized as a classroom teacher, as a mom, as a wife, as somebody who was in charge of a whole lot of things in the household so that I could not only survive the classroom, but get to a place where I could thrive and go back to college and get my master's degree and start learning how to move into administration and do all of the things that I dreamt of doing. So it all started with something that I very much emphasize with teachers that I coach right now, and that is number one, knowing your boundaries. And if you don't have any boundaries set right now and your priorities set, you need to take the time to do so. My first year of teaching was completely out of control. I will be the first one to tell you I hated my job. I was miserable. I had moved from one climate to another and was in a portable building. My allergies got so out of control, I ended up getting pneumonia. I was sick, sick, sick. My daughter was starting school in kindergarten, so I was trying to navigate being a mom of a kindergartner who only went to school half days. But I needed to find childcare in a city that I knew nobody. Plus, learn how to be a brand new teacher. Plus, make friends because we moved 1,000 miles away. There was a lot of stuff going on. We missed being at home. We had to leave our dog at home. So that was another big emotional stressor for us. We went from owning a home to living in a small apartment. It was just so different. I write that year off as one of those years where I know I ruined kids. Probably not really, but in my mind, I think I did. And I ruined a year of my own life. But I learned a lot from that because they say if you take failure and just let failure overtake everything you do, then you'll never move forward. But if you look at it as a learning opportunity, then that's when the most successful people thrive. And so I sat down and I reflected on everything that was falling apart during that first year. And what I really realized was that I did not have a single system in place for anything. I would get to the end of the school day and I would just try to survive the hour that I needed to be at school to grade the papers, or if I was taking a bag full of stuff home, then I had an hour drive home in traffic. And if it was raining, which it does in Houston quite a bit, then it was a 2 hour drive. And then I had to read with my daughter who was in kindergarten. It was so much. So when I stepped back and I really thought, okay, I have to develop systems, I first needed to look at what are my priorities and where are my boundaries? Because I didn't have any of that set going into it. I think I thought because I was so successful with student teaching in my very small town where I really wasn't the teacher of record, and we know what that means, right? We know that that means the teacher was taking care of the big things. I was just putting on a show for everyone. I think I didn't even realize that I was going to need these types of things in place. So the first thing that I definitely say to you is know what your priorities are and set your boundaries. And they can be anything you want them to be. If you want your priority to be that you don't stay past 4 o'clock most days of the week, set that. Now, you're going to have to figure out how to follow that. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But you decide, you determine what your priorities are. I can't decide those for you. Neither can your colleagues down the hall in your building or your principal. You have to be able to do that. If you need help with that, reach out to me because that can be a tedious process. And I have a few resources that can be very helpful with that. So once you have these priorities set, then you need to figure out what does your schedule really need to look like. And what I recommend to people who have no schedule, who have no life schedule, beyond just the school day is to sit down for 1 week and just record everything you do in a day for the entire week. And it starts from when you wake up to when you go to bed, because those are all the hours you have in your day. And once you are able to do that, you need to set yourself a schedule. And that schedule needs to reflect your priorities and your boundaries, because otherwise, why have them, right? So just to give you my scenario, my example, that second year, so the summer beforehand, I sat down and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be a good teacher. As a matter of fact, I want to be a great teacher and I want to be a great mom. And so where are my boundaries? And this is what I set for myself. I allowed myself 2 days a week to stay after school, and I set an end time for the after school. I still had that long drive. And so this had to be a family conversation. Even though my ex-husband wasn't as involved as I wanted him to be, he was still part of our family. And because my daughter was at our school, I had to have a system in place for where she was going to go after school while I was still there working, and have a system to cut myself off during that time. I said this would be it, and now I'm going to go home. What I was able to do with that example is I was able to take less things home. And when I did have to take things home, I set myself a schedule at home for when I would work on them. So The way my system worked was on Tuesdays and on Fridays. I stayed after school until 5 p.m. Now, we knew this was going to affect traffic. So what we did is on Tuesdays, my both days, my daughter went to the YMCA program at the school, so the after school daycare. She was able to play with her little friends. I would pick her up at 5. We knew that there was going to be a heavy drive home, so we picked up food on the way home. And my ex-husband knew he was responsible for his own dinner on that evening. On Friday, we would meet him at a restaurant and just have a nice dinner out and not have to worry about school and not have to talk about work, but be able to focus on ourselves as a family. It worked out very well for me because I could take that time and I loved doing it on Fridays because everybody goes home, right? They leave. So I was able to just be in my classroom and get things done. Now I'm very ADHD, so I used a checklist and I would write that checklist on Sunday nights and I would cross things off as I completed them. Then if I had to take work home over the weekend, I gave myself a window on Sundays. We watched football. We sometimes had friends over. They were teacher friends. So we would sit, we would get lesson planning done. We would get papers graded, grades put in, all of the things that we needed to do. Well, our husbands did whatever they had to do, barbecue or whatever, and watch football. And then when football was over at 5:30 or 6, schoolwork was done. And now we had time for our family when everybody left or we left their home and came to our home. And we didn't have to deal with work types of things any longer. It worked out really, really well. And I was able to stay on top of grading, lesson planning, all of those things. And my 2 days a week, I was able to stay on top of making sure that all of those little things that needed to get done during the week, they were able to get done. I could have parent conversations and do all of the things. Now, as my daughter got a little bit older, we moved closer to the school. As a matter of fact, we were about 7 minutes away from the school, which made that drive time totally different. And so I was able to extend my time a little bit because not only did she go to the after school program, but then she also had Girl Scouts one night a week. And so she would go right from her after school program to Girl Scouts. I would work and then I would go pick her up from Girl Scouts. As she continued to grow, and got more involved in things, I utilized that time as well. So she was in gymnastics one year. She was big in theater and she would go to private lessons for theater. The place where she had her private lessons, there was a Starbucks across the street. And so I would drop her off for her private lesson. Then I would go to the Starbucks. I would work for the hour. I would pick her back up and then I could be there with her for the rest of the evening. It sounds a little bit intense and a little bit like you have to pull your creativity out, and you do have to do that. But I'm telling you, y'all, I got to a place where I really did not have to take a lot of work home on the weekend because I was able to get it done. The next thing that I absolutely recommend is that you start to look at your school day. All of us have planning periods throughout the day or breaks throughout our day. Now, sometimes we have to go do other things, right? We might have to have a meeting with our supervisor. We might have to go to an IEP meeting. Some things come up, and that's understandable. But once you know what your schedule is going to look like, those unexpected things coming up don't happen very often. And if your principal is anything like I was, because I am so set on systems and schedules, I purposefully scheduled the entire year out prior to my staff coming back. And then they were able to put it on their calendar and they knew. So they knew, for example, on Wednesdays, I was always out of the building. I had principal meetings on Wednesdays. So that was their day that we didn't have any IEP meetings. We didn't have any RTI or MTSS meetings. We didn't have any planning meetings. Wednesdays were a free day when it came to their planning time. So I encouraged my staff to utilize their time well, and I taught them how to do it. So instead of walking around and just talking to people, which, yes, building relationships is really important. However, would be a great time to get the copies made. Or this is the great time to grade those papers that you have to grade, or to write a lesson plan or two. Finding those minutes in your day it's just going to be such a game changer because it's less things you have to do after hours. Make that parent phone call. I know a lot of schools now are utilizing other types of communication devices. Send that communication out. Meet with your team to discuss upcoming events. Do these things during those minutes that you have free in your day so that you can be focused on your students when you're with your students, and you can be focused on your family when you're home with your family. Now, my final recommendation for all of my staff was put these systems in place at the beginning of the year and continue to reflect and review them throughout the year. When you have your classroom management system in place, do not expect that the only time you're going to have to teach this to students is the first week of school, because we have breaks throughout the school year. As a matter of fact, one of my most important things that I'm going to tell the teachers that I supervise right now is make sure you remind students of expectations Monday, because we've been off for a week. And although I work in a middle school, it doesn't matter their age. They forget, right? We forget as adults. Consistently reviewing things, reflecting, making adjustments, and reminding our students is going to save us a lot of headache in the end, because the more efficient our class runs during the day, the less brain power we have to put into managing behaviors, setting expectations, ensuring that our kids are doing the right thing. And then we can focus on instruction so that we have those minutes during the day where we can get things done. Systems, y'all. Systems are very important. So to recap, set your boundaries and figure out your priorities. Then look at your day. Make sure that you know what you're focused on every minute of the day from morning until the time you go to bed. And then develop a schedule that fits for you. Pick 1 or 2 days after school to stay and get things done, where you are focused, not walking around, not talking to your friends, but focused on getting the work done. If you have to take work home on a weekend, give yourself a window of time to get it done and then shut it down. When you can do that without interruptions, that's going to save your work-life harmony, right? Because we will never get the balance. So your work-life harmony and your stress level. And then finally, make sure that you set these systems up at the beginning of the school year, if possible. And then throughout the year, implement them consistently. In addition to reviewing and reflecting, reminding your students about them on a regular basis so that things run smooth and you can put all your brain power into the actual instruction with your students. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you need help with this, I have some free resources that can help you get started. And then I have some opportunities that you can get your hands on for a very low cost, or you can schedule a time to talk with me also for a very low cost. But this is important because my focus for this month is really how are we being efficient and reducing burnout? I've been at a place of burnout. I don't like to admit it because I love this profession, but it hits all of us at some point. And then when you step back and you realize it's all about systems and efficiency, then we could maybe all avoid that and still love the profession that we went into, knowing that we wanted to make a difference for students. Have an amazing week, whether you're off or back to work, and I'll see you all next week right back here on the Empowered Educator.